I found it on a Tuesday. I was running a routine title search for a closing on Maple Street when the system pulled up a property I knew by heart. 842 Walnut Avenue, my grandmother's house. The screen showed a quitclaim deed dated March 14, 2022. My mother's name was on it, Diane Chen, grantee, and below that, a signature that was supposed to be my grandmother's. March 14, 2022. I stared at the date for maybe 30 seconds before my brain caught up with what my eyes were seeing. My grandmother was in a coma on March 14, 2022. I knew because I was there. Sitting in a plastic chair next to her hospital bed at Lakestone General, holding a hand that couldn't hold mine back. The fluorescent lights in the records room buzzed the way they always do. The microfiche machine hummed in the corner where Miriam was working late, and I could hear her turning pages, the soft slide of old film against glass. Everything was normal. Everything was the same as 5 minutes ago, except now I was looking at a document that couldn't exist. I printed the deed record. The printer groaned. It always groans. I've been meaning to put in a maintenance request for 6 months. I stood there while it spat out 4 pages, and I read them standing up, and then I sat down at my desk and read them again. Quitclaim deed. Helen Chen, grantor. Diane Chen, grantee. Property, 842 Walnut Avenue, Lakestone, Ohio. Consideration, $10 and other valuable consideration. The notary stamp was from a James Harlan. The signatures at the bottom, my mother's, the one she uses on checks and permission slips, and one that was supposed to be my grandmother's. Helen Chen. Shaky cursive that I wanted to believe was real. I know what real signatures look like. I've looked at thousands of them. It's my job. I've been a title examiner at the Lakestone County Recorder's Office for over a decade, since I was 16, and Miriam Okonkwo pulled me out of a summer youth program and taught me how to read a property record like it was telling a story. I've testified as an expert witness in 3 property disputes. I can spot an irregular notary stamp from across a room, or so Miriam likes to say, and she's not wrong. But March 14th. I had marked that date in my own calendar. The coma started March 12th. It ended March 16th when she woke up confused and asking for water in a voice that sounded like sand. For 4 days she couldn't speak, couldn't open her eyes, couldn't hold a pen. She couldn't have signed anything on March 14th. I put the printed pages in my bag and went home. My apartment on Cherry Street is small, 1-bedroom, clean, not much in it. I've lived there 2 years. I sat at my kitchen table with the pages spread out in front of me. Outside, the streetlights on Cherry flickered on, the orange kind that make everything look like a photograph from the 1990s. I had coffee. Cold. I'd made it that morning and forgot about it. I kept staring at the deed. My grandmother's house was a 1940s bungalow on Walnut Avenue. Small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with yellow countertops, a living room where the sun came through the front window in the afternoons. She'd lived there since 1962. She raised my mother there. She raised me there too, after my parents divorced when I was 11 and my mother told me I was going to stay with Grandma for a little while. The little while never ended. I figured that out by 14. By 16, I'd stopped waiting for my mother to come get me. For 3 years, I took care of her, my grandmother. When the dementia came, vascular dementia, the doctor said, small strokes you don't notice until there've been too many. I learned her medications. 7 of them. Donepezil in the morning with breakfast. Memantine twice a day. Blood pressure medication, a blood thinner, something for her thyroid, something for her stomach, a multivitamin. I tracked them in a notebook with a blue cover that I still have somewhere. I slept on a cot in the living room for the last 8 months so she wouldn't be alone at night. She would wake up scared sometimes, not knowing where she was, and I would sit with her until she remembered. This house is yours, Maya, she told me, more than once, dozens of times. I've made sure of it. I don't want you to worry. She said it while folding laundry at the kitchen table. She said it while watching Jeopardy in the living room. She said it from her hospital bed 2 days before the coma, her voice thin but her eyes clear. I've made sure of it. And I believed her. I was 24, then 25, then 26. I was managing medications and scheduling specialist appointments and learning how to bathe an adult woman without making her feel ashamed. I deferred a promotion in Columbus to stay in Lakestone. I didn't date much. I didn't travel. I didn't worry about the house because she told me not to. She died on May 7th, 2022, a Saturday. It rained that morning. Diane came to the funeral. She wore a black dress and cried at the front of the room while I stood by the door. Robert stayed in the car. My stepfather doesn't do funerals, apparently. Diane hugged me exactly once and said, "She's in a better place," and left before the reception. 2 months later, my mother texted me. I still have the message. "The bank took the house, sweetie. Nothing we could do. It was underwater. Don't worry about it." I didn't worry about it. I was 27, grieving and exhausted in a way that felt like my bones had been replaced with something heavier. I moved into this apartment. I went back to work. I didn't think about the house again until today. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the deed. March 14, 2022. The date sat there, black ink on white paper, like it had every right to exist. James Harlan, notary. Diane Chen, grantee. A sale price of $178,503 months after my grandmother died. The bank didn't take anything. The date was wrong, which meant the signature was wrong, which meant my mother had lied to me about everything. I didn't sleep that night. I got up at 5 and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table in the dark while the coffee went cold. Then I got dressed and went to work an hour early because I couldn't sit in that apartment anymore. Miriam was already there. She's always there before everyone else. She says the records room is quieter in the mornings, and she's right about that too. "You're here early," she said without looking up from her microfiche. Couldn't sleep. She looked at me then. Miriam Okonkwo has worked at the Lakestone County Recorder's Office for 35 years. She trained me when I was 16 and could barely reach the top shelf of the deed books. She looked at me the way she looks at a document that doesn't quite match, like she's finding the irregularity. Something happened. I almost told her. But I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Once I said it out loud, it became real in a way it wasn't when it was just me and 4 printed pages at my kitchen table. "Family stuff," I said. She nodded. Didn't push. Miriam never pushes. That's one of the things I've always liked about her. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the Lakestone County property database. The chain of title for 842 Walnut Avenue. I'd looked at this property 100 times over the years. When I first started, I used to pull up my grandmother's deed just to practice reading title histories. But I'd never looked at it like this. I'd never looked at it as evidence. The chain was clean until March 2022. Helen Chen, owner since 1962. No liens, no mortgages, no clouds on the title. My grandmother had paid off the house in 1987. She owned it free and clear. Then March 14, 2022, a quitclaim deed transferring ownership from Helen Chen to Diane Chen, recorded March 21, 2022, a week later. Fast, too fast, really. County recording usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. Someone had expedited it. And then August 19, 2022. Diane Chen and Robert Cole sold the property to a buyer I didn't recognize, a couple from Columbus, for $178,500. The sale closed in 18 days. Robert's real estate agency handled it. Lakestone Properties, of course. I sat back in my chair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The same buzz as always. The same office where I'd worked for over a decade, but everything looked different now. The notary was the first loose thread. James Harlan. I knew the name. He'd been doing mobile notary work in Lakestone County for years. I pulled up the notary database. His commission was active through 2025, and the state requires every notary to keep a journal of every notarization they perform. Date, time, location, type of document, signer's name. It's all there. It's supposed to be all there. I called his office from my desk phone. A woman answered, his wife, I think. She said Jim was semi-retired now, worked part-time from home. She gave me his cell number, and I wrote it on a Post-it note and stared at it for a long time. Making that call meant I was really doing this. I called him at 10:15 in the morning. "Mr. Harlan, my name is Maya Chen. I'm a title examiner with the County Recorder's Office." I have a question about a notarization from March of 2022. March 2022, he said. His voice was older, a little gravelly. That's going back a ways. What date? March 14th. There was a pause, and then he laughed, a short, surprised sound. March 14, 2022. I can tell you exactly where I was that day. You can. First day of the NCAA tournament. I had money on Ohio State. They lost to Villanova in the second round, and I lost $40. Another pause. I was at a real estate closing in Columbus all day. 4 closings back-to-back at a title office on High Street. Left at 7 in the morning, got home after 8 at night. Columbus, 140 miles from Lakestone. Mr. Harlan, I said. My voice stayed steady, which surprised me. Do you have your notary journal from that day? Should be in my records. I keep everything. My wife says I'm a pack rat, but it saved me more than once. I heard him moving, papers shuffling. What's this about, Ms. Chen? There's a quitclaim deed recorded in Lakestone County, dated March 14, 2022. It has your notary stamp on it. The shuffling stopped. That's not possible, he said. I wasn't in Lakestone that day. I know. A longer pause this time. You're saying someone used my stamp. I'm saying I need to see your journal, Mr. Harlan, if you're willing. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll be at the coffee shop on Main Street tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'll bring the journal. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were cold. I looked down at them and they were perfectly still on my desk, but they felt cold the way they do when you've been outside too long in winter. I sat there for a few minutes. The office was quiet except for the hum of machines and the occasional creak of Miriam's chair in the next row. I thought about my grandmother, about her hands, how they shook a little by the end, but she never stopped moving them. Folding laundry, stirring soup, pointing at the television when she disagreed with a contestant on Jeopardy. She had vascular dementia. The doctor explained it in his office in September of 2019. I remember because it was the day after Labor Day, and the office still had summer hours posted on the door even though summer was over. Small strokes, he said. You don't notice them when they happen, but they add up. Blood flow gets blocked, brain cells die, and one day you look at your grandmother and she doesn't remember what you told her the day before. I became her caregiver because no one else would. My mother visited 4 times in 3 years. I counted. 4 visits. The first time she brought flowers from the grocery store, pink carnations, still in the plastic wrap. The second time she stayed for 45 minutes and spent most of it on her phone. The third time, she and Robert came together, and Robert stood in the doorway the whole time like he was afraid the house was contagious. The fourth time was a week before my grandmother died, and Diane cried at her bedside and said, "I'm so sorry, Mama," over and over while my grandmother stared at the ceiling. After the funeral, Diane sent me a text. I still have it. The bank took the house, sweetie. Nothing we could do. It was underwater. Don't worry about it. 23 words. The house sold for $178,503 months later. Robert's agency handled the sale. Diane signed the deed as the grantor, as if she had every right to. As if my grandmother hadn't told me, again and again, that the house was mine. I drove to Columbus that Thursday to meet Jim Harlan. The coffee shop was one of those places with too many options on the menu and not enough places to sit. I found him at a table in the corner, a man in his 60s with thick glasses and a neatly kept folder in front of him. He stood up when I came over. "Ms. Chen. Thank you for meeting me." He nodded and opened the folder. Inside was a hardbound journal with a black cover, the kind every notary in Ohio is supposed to keep. He flipped to March 2022. Each entry was handwritten in blue ink. Date, time, location, type of document, signer's name, March 14, 2022. 4 entries, all at the same title office in Columbus. 3 refinances and 1 home equity line of credit. Nothing for a Helen Chen, nothing for a quitclaim deed, nothing for Lakestone. I was there all day, he said quietly. I remember because of the tournament, and I logged everything. I always log everything. I looked at the journal, at his careful handwriting. At the 4 entries that proved he was 140 miles away from where someone had stamped his name on a document that stole my grandmother's house. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit? I asked, just stating what you've told me. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. I've been a notary for 31 years. I don't take kindly to someone misusing my stamp. He pulled a pen from his pocket. Tell me what you need. I had the affidavit form in my bag. I'd prepared it the night before, sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning while the streetlights flickered outside. I slid it across the table. He read it twice, signed it, pushed it back to me. I hope you get whoever did this, he said. So do I said. But Jim Harlan's journal was only the beginning. I knew that even then, a notary being somewhere else proved the stamp was misused. It didn't prove who misused it. It didn't prove my mother knew the signature was forged. It didn't prove anything except that the document was wrong. And I hadn't even found the worst part yet. The affidavit sat on my kitchen table for 3 days while I figured out what to do next. I read it every night when I got home from work. Jim Harlan's careful signature at the bottom. The notary stamp from the coffee shop waitress who'd agreed to witness it. 4 entries in his journal proving he was in Columbus, not Lakestone, on the day my grandmother supposedly signed away her house. But an affidavit from a notary wasn't enough. It proved the stamp was misused. It didn't prove who misused it. It didn't prove my mother knew. It didn't prove anything in a court of law, not by itself. I needed more. The next piece was my grandmother's medical records. If I could prove she was incapacitated on March 14, 2022, really prove it with hospital documentation, then the deed wouldn't just be suspicious. It would be impossible. But there was a problem. HIPAA. I couldn't just walk into Lakestone General and ask for my dead grandmother's ICU records. I wasn't the executor of her estate. My mother was. I found Evelyn Torres through a referral from Miriam, who knows everyone in Lakestone County who's ever filed anything at the recorder's office. Evelyn is an elder law attorney. She works out of a small office above a bakery on Church Street, and her waiting room always smells like bread. She's in her early 50s with short gray hair and a way of listening that makes you feel like she's already 3 steps ahead of what you're telling her. I sat in her office on a Friday morning and told her everything. The deed, the date, the notary, my grandmother's promise, my mother's text, the $178,500. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment and then said, "How old was your grandmother when she signed this deed?" 78, and she had vascular dementia. Was she declared incompetent? No, but she was in a coma when the deed was dated. Evelyn wrote something on a legal pad. We can petition the court for the medical records. Elder exploitation is a cause of action in Ohio. If your grandmother was incapacitated and someone induced her or forged her signature to transfer property, that's financial exploitation of an elder adult. It's a civil matter, but the standard of proof is lower than criminal. How much lower? Preponderance of evidence, more likely than not. She put her pen down. A notary affidavit placing the notary 140 miles away on the date of signing. That's strong. Medical records showing your grandmother was comatose. That's stronger. Combined, it's the kind of evidence that makes opposing counsel tell their client to settle. I asked her what it would cost. Retainer is $3,500. I'll need that to start. I had $4,200 in savings. I wrote her a check for $3,500 right there in her office. My hand was steady. You're sure, she said. It wasn't really a question. My grandmother told me the house was mine. For 3 years she told me that, I'm sure. She nodded and pulled out a form, a petition for release of medical records. I'll file this Monday. It'll take a few weeks to get the records. In the meantime, don't talk to your mother about this. I wasn't planning to. Good, because once she knows, she'll try to get ahead of it. People do things when they're scared, and your mother is going to be very scared. Evelyn was right about that. She was right about all of it, but my mother found out anyway. It was Miriam who told me, not on purpose, she didn't know what she was doing. Robert Cole had come by the recorder's office on a Wednesday afternoon asking about recent title searches on his family's properties. He didn't mention my name. He just wanted to know if anyone had been poking around in records that weren't their business. Miriam told him the county recorder's office serves the public and all title searches are public record. Then she called me at my desk. "Your stepfather was just here," she said. "He was asking about someone searching his property records." I didn't tell him anything, but Maya, what's going on? I told her, not everything, but enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your grandmother was a good woman. I remember when she came in to record the original deed in 1962. She was 20 years old. She'd saved for 3 years for the down payment. She was so proud." Miriam's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. "You do what you need to do." My mother called that night. I was sitting on my couch eating cereal for dinner because I hadn't gone to the grocery store in 2 weeks. My phone buzzed. The screen said Diane Chen. I let it ring 3 times. 4. Then I picked up. "Hi, Mom." "Maya, hi, sweetie." Her voice was bright, too bright, the way it sounds when someone's been practicing what they're going to say. "I haven't heard from you in a while. Just wanted to check in. How's work?" "Work's fine." "That's good, that's really good." A pause. "You know, Robert mentioned he stopped by your office the other day, just some routine property stuff. He said he didn't see you there." "I was at lunch." "Right, of course." Another pause, longer this time. "Maya, Robert said someone's been looking into Grandma's old house, pulling records. Do you know anything about that?" I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, but my voice came out even. "It's a public records office, Mom. Anyone can pull any record." I know that." Her voice shifted, the brightness drained out of it. "But you work there, and I was just wondering if maybe you've been revisiting things from a few years ago, the house situation." "The house situation?" "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Repeat what I say like it's evidence. You used to do that when you were little, when you were mad at me. You'd repeat my words back to me like you were building a case." She took a breath. "That house situation was complicated, Maya. You were young. There were things you didn't understand." I set my cereal bowl on the coffee table. "I'm 29 years old. I've worked in property records for over a decade. I understand quitclaim deeds. I understand notary stamps. I understand that a woman in a coma can't sign her name." Silence, long enough that I checked to see if she'd hung up. Then, "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know that a house sold for $178,503 months after Grandma died. I know you told me the bank took it. I know that's not true." "This is ridiculous." Her voice was different now, not bright, not cold, something else. "You're going to embarrass yourself, Maya. You're going to dig up things that were settled years ago and make yourself look." She stopped. "Look like what?" "Like you can't let things go, like you're obsessed, like you're trying to hurt your own mother." I didn't answer right away. Outside my window, the orange streetlights came on. The same ones that had flickered on 2 weeks ago when I first brought the deed home. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said. "I'm just reading the records. It's literally what I do." "Records can be wrong." "Not these records." Another silence. This one felt different, final. "I'm hanging up now," she said. "Don't call me again until you're ready to apologize for these accusations." The line went dead. I sat on my couch for a long time. The cereal got soggy. The streetlights hummed outside. My phone stayed dark, and I thought about what Evelyn had said. About people doing things when they're scared. My mother was scared, and scared people make mistakes. She had no idea what I was holding. 3 weeks passed. I went to work. I came home. I waited. The hospital records arrived in early December. Evelyn called me at my desk. "I have them," she said. "I'm sending you a copy by email, but Maya, it's what you said. March 14th, your grandmother was in a coma. Glasgow coma scale of 6. She was intubated. She couldn't have signed a greeting card, let alone a legal document." I opened the email while she was still talking. 52 pages of medical records. Medications, vital signs, nursing notes, physician orders. And on March 14, 2022, at 2:15 p.m., patient remains unresponsive. GCS 6, family at bedside, granddaughter Maya Chen. I was at the hospital that day. The records proved I was there, and my grandmother couldn't have been anywhere else. That's good, Evelyn said, but we need one more thing. Someone who can testify that the signature itself is forged, a forensic document examiner. She gave me a name, Dr. Samuel Park. He worked out of Columbus and had testified in over 200 cases. His retainer was $2,800. I had $700 left in savings. I put the retainer on my credit card. I'd never carried a balance before in my life. It felt like jumping off something and hoping there was water at the bottom. Dr. Park's office was on the 7th floor of a glass building in downtown Columbus. The walls were covered in framed certificates, and there was a microscope on his desk that looked like it cost more than my car. He was in his mid-40s, precise in the way he moved, the way he spoke. Every word seemed chosen. Ms. Chen. He shook my hand once firmly. Evelyn Torres sent me the deed. I've done a preliminary examination. I'd like to show you what I found. He pulled up images on a large monitor. The quitclaim deed magnified, my grandmother's signature blown up to the size of my forearm. This is a classic trace signature. He pointed with a stylus. Do you see these hesitation marks? Here and here and here. A natural signature is fluid. The pen moves with confidence even when the hand is shaky. But this, the pen stopped. Started. Stopped again. That's someone trying to copy a shape they're looking at, not someone writing their own name. He clicked to another image. The ink on the signature line is a different chemical composition than the ink on the rest of the document. Different batch. Different manufacturer, possibly. Someone used a different pen for the signature than what they used to fill out the form. Another click. And the notary stamp. See the impression depth. It's uneven. A notary stamp applied at the time of signing has consistent pressure because the notary does it in one motion. This stamp was applied separately, probably pressed by hand, not with a proper notary seal press. He turned to me. Whoever created this document filled out the form with one pen, traced your grandmother's signature with a different pen, and then applied a notary stamp by hand. They didn't even do a good job of it. I stared at the screen, at my grandmother's name traced by someone else's hand, at the evidence of what had been done to her. How certain are you? I asked. In my professional opinion, there is zero possibility that Helen Chen signed this document. It is a fabrication from beginning to end. I nodded. My face felt hot, but my hands were cold, the way they always get when something matters. Will you testify to that? That's what I do. I drove home from Columbus in the dark. The highway was empty, and my headlights cut a small tunnel through the December night. I kept thinking about my grandmother, about her hands, about someone sitting at a table somewhere, tracing her name, trying to make it look real. 2 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door at 8 o'clock at night. I opened it to find a police officer. Female, mid-30s, short brown hair tucked behind her ears. Her nameplate said Reeves. Ms. Chen, Maya Chen. Yes. I'm Officer Dana Reeves with Lakestone PD. I'm here about a complaint that was filed. May I come in? I stepped back and she came inside. My apartment felt smaller with her in it. She stood by the door and didn't sit down. A harassment complaint has been filed against you, she said. The complainant is a Diane Chen, your mother. She states that you've been contacting her repeatedly, making threats about property, and that she fears for her safety. Everything stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the traffic on Cherry Street, my own breathing. I haven't contacted my mother in 3 weeks, I said. She called me. I have the phone log. Officer Reeves looked at me. Her face didn't change. The complainant also states that you've been using your position at the county recorder's office to access private property records for the purpose of harassing her and her husband. Property records are public. Anyone can access them. That's the law. I know what the law is. She paused. Ms. Chen, I've been doing this for 9 years. I know when someone is using a police report as a weapon. But I still have to investigate. Do you have any documentation that might help me understand what's going on here? I walked to my kitchen table. The deed was there, the notary affidavit, the hospital records, the preliminary forensic report that Dr. Park had emailed me that morning. I picked up the folder and handed it to her. "Read this." She read for 3 minutes, standing in my living room next to the door. I watched her face as she turned the pages. She didn't look surprised, disgusted maybe, but not surprised. When she finished, she closed the folder and handed it back to me. "I'm going to note in my report that the complainant appears to have filed this report in bad faith. I'll also note that you have documentation of what appears to be a civil matter regarding property fraud." "That's all I can do. This report will be part of the record." "Thank you." She nodded. At the door, she paused. "Ms. Chen, for what it's worth, if this goes to court, my report will help you. A false police report doesn't look good for the person who filed it." After she left, I sat on my couch and didn't move for a long time. My mother had tried to use the police against me. She had told them she was afraid of me. She had tried to make me into someone who needed to be stopped, and it had backfired, completely. She had created an official record of her own bad faith. I called Evelyn the next morning. She did what? Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Filed a false police report. The officer documented it." There was a pause, then Evelyn laughed, not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that means someone just made your case for you. "Maya, I need you to listen to me. Your mother just handed us evidence of a pattern. First the forged deed. Then the false police report. A judge is going to look at this and see exactly what we see, someone who will do anything to silence you." She filed the petition on December 16th, a Monday. The hearing was set for January 28th at 9 in the morning in courtroom 3B of the Lakestone County Courthouse. 6 weeks. I went back to work. I came home. I waited. But I wasn't the same person who had found a deed on a Tuesday in October. I had proof now. I had a forensic examiner who could testify. I had a police report that showed my mother would lie to any authority who would listen. And I had 6 weeks to prepare for the moment when everything would change. My mother had 6 weeks too. 6 weeks to realize what was coming. She was about to find out exactly what I'd been holding. The 6 weeks before the hearing were worse than I expected. My mother didn't wait quietly. She called everyone. My half-brothers, Justin is 16 and Tyler is 14, and I barely know them because Diane kept them away from me their whole lives, stopped responding to my texts. Family group chats I hadn't been part of in years suddenly had my name in them. Ungrateful. Vindictive. After everything Diane did for her. Robert showed up at the recorder's office in early January. He didn't ask for Miriam this time. He walked straight to my desk, stood over me while I was on the phone with a title company, and waited. When I hung up, he said, "You need to drop this. You're tearing the family apart." I looked at him. My stepfather of 16 years, who had never once asked me how my day was, who had stood in the doorway of my grandmother's house like he was afraid of catching poverty. "The family tore itself apart when you forged my grandmother's signature," I said. "I'm just writing down what happened." He left without saying anything else. His face was the color of old cement. Miriam intercepted the complaint he tried to file with my supervisor the next week. She didn't tell me about it until after. "He said you were using county resources for personal matters," she said. "I told them you'd accessed nothing that isn't available to every citizen of Lakestone County, which is true." She squeezed my shoulder. "He won't be back." My Aunt Karen called from Arizona on a Sunday night. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She's my grandmother's younger daughter, Diane's sister. She left Ohio in 2012 and never came back. "Diane did this to me too," she said. "Not the house, a different thing. When Mom first got sick, there was a savings account, about $30,000. Mom wanted it split between us. Diane was the executor. I never saw a dime." "Why didn't you do anything?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I was tired, Maya. Because I was living in Arizona and I didn't want to fly back and fight with my sister for 6 months. I let it go." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Don't let it go." I promised her I wouldn't. The night before the hearing, I laid out my clothes on my bed. A gray blazer I'd bought at the mall 3 years ago for a job interview. Black pants. Shoes I'd polished with a paper towel because I didn't own shoe polish. I put my evidence folder on the kitchen table and went through it one page at a time, the way I'd been trained to review a chain of title. The deed. March 14, 2022. The impossible date. The notary affidavit. Jim Harlan in Columbus, 140 miles away, losing $40 on an Ohio State basketball game. The hospital records. Glasgow Coma scale of 6. Intubated, unresponsive. The forensic report, traced signature. Ink mismatch, improper stamp application. The police report. Officer Reeves's notes. Complainant appears to have filed this report in bad faith. 52 pages of evidence. A paper trail that told a story no one could argue with. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the wind outside and waited for morning. The Lakestone County Courthouse is an old building. Built in 1907, limestone facade, wide stone steps worn smooth in the middle from 100 years of feet. I'd walked past it 1,000 times on my way to work. I'd never been inside as anything other than a county employee. Courtroom 3B was on the 3rd floor. Wooden benches, high windows, the smell of old paper and clear wax. I sat at the table next to Evelyn. She was wearing a navy suit and had organized the evidence file into tabs. She showed me the order she'd present everything. She'd done this hundreds of times. Her hands were perfectly still. My hands were not. I put them in my lap. Diane and Robert arrived 5 minutes before 9. Diane wore a cream-colored dress and pearls, church clothes. Robert was in a suit that didn't fit him quite right through the shoulders. They sat at the other table with their attorney, a man I recognized, Alan Weiss, who handled real estate closings for Lakestone properties. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My mother didn't look at me, not once. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Okonkwo. I'd seen the name before. She'd been on the bench for 20 years. She was not related to Miriam, but they knew each other. Everyone knows everyone in Lakestone. Evelyn stood up. Your Honor, this is a petition to void a quitclaim deed on the grounds of forgery and financial exploitation of an elder adult. We will show that the deed transferring 842 Walnut Avenue from Helen Chen to Diane Chen, dated March 14, 2022, was fabricated in its entirety. She presented the evidence in order, like telling a story. First, the deed itself, entered as Exhibit A, then Jim Harlan's affidavit. Exhibit B, the notary swore he was in Columbus on the date of signing. 140 miles away. 4 real estate closings. A $40 bet on Ohio State. Diane's attorney objected. The notary's memory of a date over 2 years ago. Judge Okonkwo cut him off. The notary kept a contemporaneous journal. That's what journals are for. Overruled. Then the hospital records. Exhibit C, 52 pages. The judge put on her glasses and read the March 14th entry. Glasgow Coma scale 6. Intubated, unresponsive. She took her glasses off and looked at Diane for a long moment, then Dr. Park. He took the stand and explained what he'd found, the hesitation marks, the ink mismatch, the uneven stamp impression. He used words like inconsistent with genuine execution and characteristics indicative of tracing. On cross-examination, Diane's attorney asked him 3 questions and sat down. There was nothing to cross-examine. The forensic evidence is unequivocal, Dr. Park said. Helen Chen did not sign this document. It is a fabrication. Evelyn entered the police report last. Exhibit D, Officer Reeves's notes. She didn't make a big speech about it. She just handed it to the judge and said, "This goes to pattern, Your Honor." Judge Okonkwo read it. She set it down. She looked at Diane and Robert, then at me, then back at Diane. "I have reviewed the evidence," she said. "The court finds that the quitclaim deed dated March 14, 2022, purportedly signed by Helen Chen, is a forgery. The deed is void. The property at 842 Walnut Avenue reverts to the estate of Helen Chen." She turned a page. The court further orders Diane Chen and Robert Cole to pay restitution in the amount of $178,500. The full proceeds of the fraudulent sale within 90 days. The gavel came down. Once, sharp and final, Diane stood up. Her chair scraped against the wood floor. "This is ridiculous." Her voice was high, shaking. "Maya, how can you do this to your own mother?" She looked at me then, really looked at me. For the first time since she'd walked into the courtroom, I looked back at her. My hands were still now, steady the way they get when I'm reading a property record and the pieces are fitting together. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I just read the records." She stared at me. Robert put his hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Alan Weiss was already packing his briefcase. The court reporter's keys stopped clicking. Outside the high windows, the January sky was gray and flat, the kind of sky that could snow or couldn't, the kind that doesn't commit to anything. Evelyn touched my elbow. "It's done." And it was. The deed was void. The house was my grandmother's again. The truth had a court order now, but nobody says anything about what happens after. Nobody tells you how to go home when home was a courtroom and the person you just defeated in it was your own mother. Nobody tells you what the silence feels like. The court order gave them 90 days to pay. I went back to work the next morning. Miriam was at her desk already. She's always there first. She looked up when I came in, studied my face for a moment, then walked to the break room and came back with 2 cups of coffee. She set one on my desk and didn't say anything. Just sat in the chair next to my terminal and drank her coffee while I drank mine. After a while she said, "The county board meets in March. They're going to review Robert Cole's real estate license." I nodded. The coffee was the bad kind from the machine in the lobby. It was perfect. The news moved through Lakestone the way news moves through small towns, not fast, but thorough. Diane stopped coming to church. Someone told someone who told Miriam who told me. Her women's group sent a card and she didn't respond. Robert's agency put out a statement about reviewing internal procedures, which meant he was on leave. The buyers from Columbus, the couple who'd bought my grandmother's house, not knowing it was stolen, moved out by March. The court had contacted them, and they'd agreed to rescind the sale as long as their purchase price was returned. Robert and Diane were responsible for that, too. Justin and Tyler, my half-brothers, didn't reach out. I didn't expect them to. They were 16 and 14, and they'd grown up hearing that I was difficult, dramatic, not really part of the family. You don't undo 16 years of that with one court hearing. Maybe when they're older. Maybe never. I didn't know, and I was learning to be okay with not knowing. Aunt Karen sent me a card in February. A photograph of my grandmother on the front, young, maybe 25, standing in front of the house on Walnut Avenue the day she died. 1962. She was smiling in a way I'd never seen her smile in person. Karen had written on the back, "She knew you'd fight for it. She always knew." I put the card in the shoebox under my bed with the rest of my grandmother's things. The house sat empty for 3 weeks after the court order. It was mine now, or it would be once the estate paperwork cleared. I drove past it twice, slowed down, didn't stop. On the first Saturday in February, I stopped. The key was in a lockbox on the front door. The buyers had left it when they moved out. I'd gotten the combination from Evelyn. My fingers were cold February in Ohio, the kind of cold that gets into your knuckles, and it took me 3 tries to get the lockbox open. The key turned in the lock with a sound I knew. The same sound it had made when I was 11 and coming home from school. When I was 16 and coming home from my first day at the recorder's office. When I was 26 and coming home from the hospital after sitting with my grandmother for 14 hours. The house was empty. The new buyers hadn't left much, a few scuff marks on the floor where their furniture had been. The walls were a different color than I remembered. They'd painted over the floral wallpaper in the hallway, probably for the best. That wallpaper was ugly. My grandmother had picked it out in 1974 and refused to replace it because it still works fine. I walked through every room. The kitchen, yellow countertops unchanged. The drawer that always stuck, still stuck. I pulled it open and found a single spoon inside. Just a spoon, nothing special about it. I left it there. The living room? The spot by the front window where my grandmother's chair had been. The sun came through the same way it always had, making a rectangle of light on the floor. I'd slept on a cot 6 feet from this window for 8 months. The cot was gone, but I could still see the slight indentations in the carpet where the legs had been. Her bedroom, empty now, just the closet with the sliding door that always came off its track, still off its track. I sat down on the floor of the living room, the same spot where the cot had been. The January light came through the window and I sat in it for a long time. I thought about my mother. About the text she'd sent me 2 years ago, "The bank took the house, sweetie. Nothing we could do." 23 words. About the way she'd looked at me in the courtroom, the way you look at a stranger who's just shoved you. About whether I would ever speak to her again. I didn't know the answer to that. I still don't. I thought about my grandmother, about her hands folding laundry. About "This house is yours, Maya, I've made sure of it." About the fact that she'd been right all along, she just hadn't known someone would try to steal the proof. The records don't lie. That's what I'd told myself through every late night at my kitchen table, every page of evidence, every person who told me to let it go. The records don't lie, and my grandmother didn't lie, and the house was exactly where it was supposed to be. I won. The deed was void. The money was coming back. The truth had a judge's signature on it now, and it had cost me every living family member I had left. Some of them were never really mine to begin with. That's what Miriam told me later when I told her I wasn't sure if I'd done the right thing. "Family isn't biology," she said. "It's who shows up. Your mother didn't show up. You did." I locked the house when I left, made sure the deadbolt caught, made sure the windows were closed, the way I used to do before my grandmother went to sleep. Outside, the sky was gray and low. February in Ohio, the kind of winter that makes you forget what green looks like. The sidewalk was wet from melted snow. My breath came out in clouds, but it was almost 5 o'clock and the sun hadn't set yet. In October, when I'd found the deed, the sun was gone by 6. Now it was February and there was still light in the sky at 5:15. Not much. Just a thin strip of pale gold along the horizon, but it was there. The days were getting longer.